Hello， 大家好，这里是 SmallWOD 特别系列节目，窃听 SmallWOD 现场。我们在全球各地会定期举办线上线下活动，在新加坡、东京、伦敦等地，我们会召唤出本地的朋友和意见领袖，有时候有特定的行业主题分享，有时候是让大家相互启发灵感，交流意见，找到组织，交个朋友，有时候一起草坪野炊，小酌一杯。那么这个特别系列节目是为那些不能来到活动现场的朋友准备的，就仿佛是大学时你翘课拜托你室友帮忙录音，或者你是一个 I 人就不愿意社交，但你又想知道大家在全世界各地做什么，于是我们帮你偷偷窃听了活动现场。虽然相隔千里，但是请和我们来线上云面基吧。我们在各大主流视频平台也会有现场的采访和有趣的彩蛋，不妨在不同平台上试试以 SmallWOD 为关键词来搜索我们。本期节目是9月6号 SmallWOD 的线上活动，我们邀请到了2位重磅嘉宾。第一位是 Catherine Melcher-Ray， 她是 Berkeley Haas 的 MBA 导师，前资生堂 CMO， 曾经在耐克和 Louis Vuitton 任职高管。第二位是 Natalie Kelly， 是 Zappy 的 CMO， 她曾经是 HubSpot 的高管。在本期的活动中，他们分享了如何利用跨文化策略，将对消费者的洞察转化成符合不同市场需求的产品，也分享如何通过语言、本地化的符号和叙事，打造真正能与全球消费者产生共鸣的品牌。当然，你也可以在这一次窃听活动中听到他们的真实案例分享、互动和演示，以及后来参加活动的创业者如何与他们交流。以后如果你想要报名我们的线上线下活动，请关注 SmallWOD 的小红书 X 或者公众号。那么窃听开始。
Oh, hi. Yeah, I see a group of people.
Yeah.
Hello, guys. Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Oh, thank you.
Have like a group audience.
Yeah.
Welcome all. It's like a taking class, right?
Online session. Yeah, exactly.
Let's wait for another 1 minute and we can rock and roll.
Sure.
What's the drink on the table there in green?
Sprite. Sprite.
Oh,
Yes.
right.
Love it. It's the kind of thing I would used to bring as gifts because it's exactly about this book, Brand Global, Adapt Local. It's the same green Sprite can, but I don't see where it says Sprite.
Yeah, they don't have Sprite, but did a great job in renaming. So it's like very like.
Does it say Sprite anywhere on that can?
Is there English? I think
No.
no. Is there? Oh, here Sprite. There's a logo on the back.
Okay. Right. Okay, great. I love it.
The name is Mandarin.
Right. Yeah. And how do you pronounce that?
雪碧.
Great. It's great. We have a case study of a food product because foods and beverages are really fascinating when they go across country culture.
Yeah, I think, guys, we can get started maybe. And meanwhile, we can wait for others. Is that okay? Cool.
Sure.
So,
cool.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's online session. I'm Leonie from SmallWOD, together with my colleague, Bran. Hi, Bran.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Nice to meet you all.
Cool. So SmallWOD, actually, we are a new community and created for the entrepreneurs and professionals worldwide. And our mission, you can see here, is clear: for the global doers and by the global doers. And that's also why we hosted today's session and invite Professor Catherine and Natalie to share their use cases and their insights for us. And we really hope the sharing and conversations can bring benefit and value to all of you. And we are also happy to co-host this event with our partner, Neil and Chelsea. Hi, Neil and Chelsea.
Hi.
So now I will hand it over to Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Chelsea. I'm the co-founder of GlobeVille. So I graduated from Columbia Business School last year and moved to Silicon Valley since then. I actually met Neil during my exchange at Berkeley. We both shared a passion to help international students and professionals to overcome the challenges like language barrier, cultural difference, and build an effective supporting system here. So those conversations actually inspired us to create GlobeVille, a cultural bridge and community hub to connect the global talents to Silicon Valley's innovative ecosystem. So our goal is to provide a welcoming space where newcomers can connect, grow, and thrive. No matter you are just visiting here for a short time or you want to settle down here in the long term. So through events and meaningful conversation and content, we want to foster the high quality conversation and make your staying here less isolating and more empowering. So this is actually our first event in partnership with SmallWOD. I will just hand it over to Neil and he will share more stories behind this event.
Hi everyone. So I'm Neil. I'm from saying hi from Silicon Valley. So I'm an MBA graduate from UC Berkeley Harvard Business School, and Catherine is my professor in international marketing. Yeah, just briefly introduce myself. So I was born in the countryside of Hunan province in China, and I was working in ByteDance for 7 years in product and strategy and marketing. And at the age of 31-year-old, I quit my job and I moved to US to pursue my MBA. And so I started GlobeVille with Chelsea because we share the challenges when adapting a new culture. So going back to my 2 years at Berkeley House MBA, I found that international marketing course created a lasting impact for my career. It changed my perspective about marketing actually. So some of us may confuse marketing with advertising, but after taking this class, I found that marketing is all about strategy and empathy. So when Catherine released her new book with Natalie, I grabbed a copy. Immediately in the first day of the release. So I highly recommend this book, Global Brand Global Adapt Local, because it's not like a textbook. It's all about their strategic insights and their personal stories across different continents. And if you are working in marketing or working overseas or working internationally, I highly recommend to grab a copy about this. So I talked to Catherine whether she can share some of the insights from this book and the class to our Chinese professionals. And they say yes. So here comes our webinar today. I'm excited to welcome Catherine and Natalie.
Thank you, Neo. Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine. So we're really delighted to be able to be here, and we want to thank everyone who made this happen. We're going to share slides. So we have some slides that we prepared to be able to walk us through not only these case studies about growing a business internationally, but also who we are and how we met. So let me share my slides. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So our book is, as Neo mentioned, called Brand Global, Adapt Local. So we're going to talk really about how do you build a brand across culture. And we're going to start with explaining who we are. So I have worked across 5 different cultures, 3 different continents, and 3 different languages. So I'm culturally and linguistically fluent in French and in Japanese. I've lived in Japan 9 years, 3 different times, believe it or not, under 3 different emperors. That's a whole separate story. And in 3 different industries. So I worked in television, I worked in luxury with Louis Vuitton, and then I was CMO at Shiseido most recently. But I've also worked in other industries. So I worked for Hyatt as head of Park Hyatt and Grand Hyatt, their luxury brands. And I was CMO at Babel, the tech company in Berlin. So all of this means that I've learned to adapt not only businesses to different markets, but I've learned personally. Neo and Chelsea were talking about of living overseas and both learning to study there and then also to work there. So I'll turn over to Natalie and then we'll tell you how we met.
Thank you, Catherine. And I also want to say what a wonderful group that you have built here and what a great community. I really wish that I had something like this when I was living abroad. My name is Natalie Kelly, and I have a background in translation, interpretation, communications. I've worked in tech for the most recent years of my career working at some of the companies that you see here. I started out as an interpreter at AT&T Language Line for Spanish. I lived in Ecuador several times, went to 3 different universities there, and also lived in Mexico and in Ireland throughout the course of my career. I've worked at the companies you see here, mostly tech companies, but also was a chief research officer at a market research firm. And I'm currently the chief marketing officer at a company called Zappy, which is a consumer insights platform.
Okay, so how did we end up collaborating? If you look closely, you'll see Natalie says she's in New Hampshire, and I am in Portland, Oregon. So it's really kind of a funny story. I teach every fall at Berkeley, and in my introductory class, I have various articles about how to learn about what it means to do international marketing. And I use an article I found in Harvard Business Review about blind spots. It's blind spots of doing international business, and I happened to find it as I was looking for my cases. And it's a very simple and to the point about simple things people do. Think confusing a country for a region, like thinking all of Asia is going to behave the same way, or the same with languages in different regions. And I kept thinking I should have written this article. Who is this woman, Natalie Kelly? And then one day on LinkedIn, this Natalie Kelly commented on one of my posts. And I'm like, my God, is this really the same woman? So I looked her up and I realized, wow, she actually has the real chops. She does know what she's talking about in global marketing. And so I wrote her back, and then she said, hey, it'd be fun to connect sometime. And so that's how we connected. The first time we met, I told her I was writing a book, and she thought I'd love to contribute because I've written already 3. And I was like, oh my God, I hadn't written any. And so that's literally how it started, is we met on LinkedIn. And the funny part is that we only met in person after we'd finished the book. So we did the whole thing online.
Yes. And I'll add that once Catherine and I had our first Zoom call, I realized that she looked very familiar to me, and I didn't know why. And then I realized she was the same woman that I had seen featured in an article in the Wall Street Journal many years earlier when I was in my first VP of marketing role. And I saw the article, something like, this Hyatt executive has a ball gown in her carry-on. And I remember thinking, wow, she has such a global life, and that's similar to the life that I want to live. And all those years later, we somehow connected on social media. So it's quite an interesting story, with the world being so close by, but also so far away, but connected through digital technology.
Yeah, it's true. In fact, that article in the Wall Street Journal almost got me fired. So sometimes PR can be careful. My new boss was jealous. Anyway, so that's how we got to know each other. So we'll shift now and talk about some of the key fundamentals of growing a business internationally. So we want to start with the basics. And I'm going to start by asking you a question. Imagine a basic t-shirt. What do you think it looks like? You can write in the chat. What do you think it looks like? What color is it? What shape is it? What material is it? I can't see the chat if I am presenting. Wait, here's the chat.
I can tell you, pure white round neck cotton, white cotton that goes well with denim, white.
Right. Okay. Crew neck, white. What about sleeves? Long sleeves, short sleeves, button up, white, 100% cotton short sleeve shirt. Okay. Kind of like this. I'm assuming this is what you're thinking. Yeah, well, exactly. That's what many people do think. So when I was working on a consulting project for a Paris-based fashion company called Comptoir des Cotonniers, Leonie may know it.
Hi, Catherine.
It was purchased.
Sorry for interruption. I think we need to adjust a little bit for the slides. We cannot see the full screen, just like the first half of it. Can you check?
You can't see the whole screen?
Yeah, we cannot.
Okay, let me stop sharing and
mode.
see if I can redo it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try. Yeah, thanks for telling me. So I'm gonna get out of my. This always happens at Berkeley too. We always have technical problems. Okay, so I'm gonna try it one more time, and now I'm gonna share again, and let me know if you can see it. Can you see it now?
I think still the half.
Still the half. Which half can you see? There's only one image. There's only one
one
shirt.
element. Yeah. Now it works. Now it's good.
Yeah.
Please continue.
It's working?
Sorry for
Yeah.
interruption.
No, please interrupt me. Interrupt me if that happens, because the point is to share this with everybody. So if that's not working, then it's not good for anyone. Okay, good. Okay, so I was working on this project in Paris for a French company called Comptoir des Cotonniers. It was purchased by Fast Retailing, so Uniqlo's parent company. We were working on expanding the business, and the Japanese managers from Uniqlo kept saying, we need more basics. We need more basics. And the French merchants kept saying, on a plein de basiques. We have many basics. If anything, we have too many basics. We need more signature statements. And so they kept going back and forth on this notion of what does basic mean. And we learned what happened when we did ethnographic research. So we did consumer insights, and we followed French women to their home, to their apartment, and asked them about the brand. And a French woman went into her armoire and pulled out a white cotton short-sleeved shirt. But this is what it looked like. And if you can see it clearly, it's in lace. So it's incredible, because lace is something that most people would think is not a basic. But in French culture, lace has a history of being a national craft, and it engenders national pride. And for many French women, the notion of basic means foundational. This is a key item around which I can build a wardrobe, and I can throw it on and put a little jacket over it, and it just adds a touch of chic. So in the French women's mindset, even something like the word basic, where the Japanese are speaking English and the French are speaking English, and they're meeting what they think is the same word, they have completely different expectations. Why is this so? This is true because words matter externally to understand what your consumer is saying, because we saw the French woman, but also internally, where you're working with teams in different countries. But more often than not, words are actually only the beginning, as we thought, and sometimes they're misleading. It's actually the meaning that connects. So to build brand value, you have to identify first the gaps between words and meaning. You can imagine if this exists for a basic t-shirt, the complexity of understanding values, conveying messages, and benefits to your target audience around the world. Why is this so complicated? Because culture itself is complicated. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the notion of culture as an iceberg. It's called an iceberg because the things we see above the waterline are the things we think of when we think about culture: food, music, literature, dress, movies, language, basics. But these visible cultural symbols are infused with hidden assumptions, meanings, understandings. So below the surface, we find all of these unspoken rules and assumptions. And what we really all need to do in working internationally is what I call lowering the waterline. We have to expose hidden assumptions and make really the invisible visible. Brands must do this all the time when they're going to another country, because you want to create trust, and trust begins with shared understanding. And we'll explain why. So this is the core idea behind our book, where we think cultural intelligence is really the key. And we'll go through the different stages of what cultural intelligence really means. And you can see all the brands that appear in our book. And the former chairman of LVMH Japan, a Frenchman, supported the book, saying that it's a key guide for navigating global business, as many other people in the industry. Okay, now we're going to shift and talk a little bit about some case studies, because this was all very theoretical. But what does it really mean? Like for that Sprite can in the meeting room. Was that in Singapore? Where was the Sprite can?
It's in Shanghai.
That's in Shanghai. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I lost my meeting chat when I got it. Okay, all right. So we're going to go through a few of these. You'll see the first two case studies are foundational, and then we'll apply that. And you'll see that that's the same thing you need to do every time you go into a different market. So building brand value starts with the brand. And so we'll start there too. So how many of you know Park Hyatt? You can just sort of raise your hand in your chat or just throw it into the chat. I was hired by Hyatt as the VP luxury brands. If you, for those who are in cities that they have, I know Beijing has them, Tokyo, New York, Shanghai, I think, yeah, Shanghai has one. So I was hired as the VP of luxury brands to build their brands, both globally and in the high end, and to separate Park Hyatt from the other Hyatt brands. And so we had 35 hotels around the world, and we were preparing to open one in New York. And I had to figure out what was the unifying trend about this brand, but that was brought to life differently in each of these countries. So I started by doing all the research I could. Where is Park Hyatt from? Chicago. What does it mean? And why is it called Park Hyatt? So I looked everywhere. I scoured the archives, and there were no stories about it. I started looking into the history of Chicago, which is known for its architecture. And sure enough, many Park Hyatts are in incredible buildings. But that wasn't really what held all of them together. And so someone said, Catherine, we really don't know. You'll have to talk to the chairman and founder. And I said, I have to go and talk to the founder of Hyatt in order to figure out the story behind Park Hyatt. So I went up to the top floor of, again, a skyscraper, and I met with a man named Tom Pritzker, who is the founder. He and his father started Park Hyatt. And he said, Catherine, I hear you want to know the story of Park Hyatt. There really is no story. And so I said, well, okay, can you please tell me how you started the first one? And he said, well, it's really very simple. My father and I had a growing business of large convention hotels like the Regencies. And we had more and more investors coming from different countries, and they would stay with us, but it got to be kind of a pain. And so we found a small boutique hotel that was for sale on Michigan Avenue, a central avenue in downtown Chicago. And, we really just wanted to have a place where people could serve them as though they were our friends and family. So we love great food and wine, and we wanted to have great food and wine there. We like art a lot. He was the chairman of the Art Institute of Chicago. So we wanted really award-winning art in the hallways. And we just wanted them to treat our guests as though they were, our friends and family. And he said, so you see, there's really no story. And I said, oh my gosh, well, with all due respect, Mr. Pritzker, I think that's the story I want to tell. And he said, well, I mean, I have no problem with that. That's the true story. And the head of global PR said, no, we don't talk about the Pritzkers for Hyatt. And I said, no, it's not about Hyatt. It's about Park. We want to set Park Hyatt apart from the other Hyatts and from all of our competitors, the Mandarin Oriental, the Four Seasons, and Rosewood, and really to make it distinct that we know our guests, and it's like an extension of our family. And we had those pillars, most of those pillars already. We already had a food and wine program. So it gave me the direction I needed as a brand to be able to expand the hotels all around the world around those same three pillars. So the next things I did was I did a global partnership with Sotheby's and New York's Museum of Modern Art. And then we worked on a big mindfulness program to be able to train our employees to be able to welcome all of the visitors as friends and family. So we threw out the check-in list and we replaced it with teaching our staff to be able to see and read guests of any culture, of any background, any time of day. And then we created a campaign, and I'll show you a couple images of that called Luxury is Personal. So I'll show you, you may remember this. This was when we opened our Park Hyatt, the first one in New York City. And we also did one in Vienna at the time. And so we created a campaign called Luxury is Personal. And we went the opposite way. If you know Mandarin Oriental, where they showed it was, I'm a fan, she's a fan, and they use famous people. It's the opposite of an influencer strategy. If you go to Park Hyatt, you go because we will keep your name private, but we know you. We know what you like and we know what you want. So we did all of these campaigns where we didn't show the model, but we showed that we knew what they liked. And so in this one, Park Hyatt, there's this was for New York because we opened across from Carnegie Hall, and we said 40-year single malt Scotch. We know that's what you want. We'll have it in your room. Dark chocolate truffles, oversized soaking tub, and backstage. And we created a handle called My Lux List that people could spread around social media, saying exactly what it is that they want. And so this way, we had one concept and we could replicate it in different markets. So this one is in Paris, for instance. A young woman comes to Paris for the fashion shows, and she wants a guided tour of the catacombs, a personal stylist, peanut butter and banana sandwiches, white peonies in her room, and cinnamon jelly beans. So you see, each one, we don't know who they are, and it doesn't matter. We keep your name confidential. And a final one, I kind of love this one. It would be so nice if it were today. It's set in Washington, D.C., and it's a woman and her husband in their room, and she's the one going to work. And it says, soft-boiled eggs, 8 a.m. car to the Capitol. That would be the U.S. Capitol. A reservation at an art gallery after 5, and a secure phone line. So this is an example of the first step, which is when you're going to brand global, adapt local, you need to really understand what your brand stands for. What are the values your brand stands for? Because those are universal. And yet the way you bring them to life will change from one market to another. This allows us to say, what is a brand? Any ideas? Now I can see the chat. What is a brand? An awareness, identity, upper funnel. Okay, now we're getting technical. Brand is consistency and engagement. Okay, yes. So we're going to go through exactly what a brand is. A brand has multiple aspects of what makes it a brand. So it symbolizes at the very highest level, it symbolizes a promise in the mind of consumers. That's what it is. So someone just said iconography. Yeah, all of these things are important, but they're not the pinnacle of what it really is. A brand is steeped in culture and values. You can see with the Park Hyatt example, it is steeped in the culture of this family from Chicago. You have to support your brand. It requires investment because it has to live and breathe over time. That will create consistency. In this case, for Park Hyatt, we had to do the same kind of service in one market and another because it's that consistency that allows you to make sure you deliver against the promise. And here's the challenging part. On the one hand, it has to be consistent. And on the other hand, it has to be organic and it has to evolve over time as the consumer changes. So for brands, there is always a story. Sometimes you just have to find it. Every brand, product, and marketing challenge holds a narrative. It can be about their identity or about their values or their aspirations. And it's really key to kind of get understand what that is, because often those values are emotional, and those are the ones that will connect with consumers all over the world. All right, let's do one more foundational one, and then we'll apply this. So now we're going to travel to the West Coast of the US, which is actually where I live in Portland, Oregon, because I worked at Nike. I was the general manager of women's footwear at Nike. I ran women's footwear, which crossed 12 different sport categories like tennis, soccer, volleyball, running. And we were number one in women's basketball shoes, but we were not number ones in their hearts and minds. So we thought we had the product. We had visibility because the WNBA, Women's National Basketball Association, had just started and we were investing in it. But we could see that we weren't really connecting with their hearts and minds. And so we had to develop cultural competence. And I'm bringing this one up, even though it's an American brand in America, because the notion of understanding your consumer can be applied even in your domestic market. Once you learn how to do this, you can realize that sometimes you're only focused on a certain consumer group, and there's another consumer group at home that you're really not addressing. So how many people here have heard of the QR angle? It's I don't know if we have female athletes in the group, but it's something. If you are a female an athlete, you may have heard of it. So women have twice as many knee injuries in sports as men do. You know from experience, because I played varsity volleyball in college, and I've had two knee injuries. So the reason is women's wider hips put a disproportionate exterior weight onto their legs. And the way we've developed footwear has never compensated for women's hips. So if you can see in this image, that wider hip is putting different pressure on the knee. So we discovered this, and so we created a different insole, and we created a shoe that was really based on women's morphology. So I took the shoe and I went with a designer, and once again, I went to the audience. Who is our target audience? And we spoke to teen basketball players, and we brought them the shoe that we were so happy with. And we said, well, tell us what you think of the shoe. And they held it like you see in the slide, just like the footwear walls, which is just like Nike designers have in their offices of cars. So they all have car posters because they're designing shoes kind of like cars, and they're all men. The women took the shoe and they stood up and they put it on the ground. And the first thing they did is they looked at it from the top down. And I realized right here and there that we were looking at it all wrong, that we might have now had the internal design, but from the external design, we had to also design it differently in order to appeal to women, because women were traditionally used to seeing their shoes in department stores where they usually are sold in pairs and from top down. So this gave us a lot of insight. So we learned to develop both technically advanced and visually appealing shoes to women. And it gave me the idea to go out and open department stores, because Nike had not been sold in department stores to women at that time. And then we developed a whole campaign all around it called Design for Female Athletes. So this example gives us an idea of a framework that's really important. Is what is your value proposition? There are three kinds of value, and any brand needs to do at least one uniquely. Are you delivering functional value? Are you delivering monetary value? Or are you delivering psychological value? So in this case, Nike obviously was delivering not only now functional value, but also we were now delivering psychological value too. So this is another favorite expression. Read the air and listen with your eyes. Consumer insights is so important, but often if we, it won't always tell you exactly what you need to hear. You have to really read it yourself. And if you can, attend the groups where you can also find that magic, because it's the insights there that really tell you what you want to know. Okay, the question now is, what about AI? Do we think AI will be able to help us with this ourselves? This is where Natalie always has an idea, because her company is working with consumer insights and AI. And she has an expression all the time. I'll let her say it about whether it's additive or subtractive.
Well, yeah, I often say that AI and most new technologies don't just replace something. They're neither additive nor subtractive. They're multiplicative. So they're transformative. They actually transform the way we do things rather than taking something away or simply adding something. They usually convert and transform other processes and other ways of doing things.
Exactly. Yeah. So AI is great and we all are using it all the time. But the one thing AI doesn't get is culture. Because culture is context. So in all these examples that we've seen, you can see if you don't know that that there might be differences it won't really understand that. If you know and you can frame it to learn about what might those differences be from one culture to another, then it can spot it. But you have to be able to understand where the gaps are. I saw the one question on what would be an example of a brand with monetary value. We have a great one, Uniqlo. Uniqlo has beat its competitors by creating high quality products at lower prices. That's the easiest way to be able to get customer attention, is by creating something that is of equal quality at a lesser price. If there are other questions we can jump into. I realize I've been going on a long time, so I'm wondering if maybe we should jump to, I think the next part is where we go into a case study about food. So let's go into that, and then we'll change it up a bit. So the next one has to do with, now we're going to Asia, and here we're going into Malaysia. So we're going to ask you, what is unique about KitKat? You can use the chat. You can also just say it out loud. That's easier. Can't love KitKat more. I know, I love KitKat too. What's unique about them? Localized flavor, matcha flavor for the Japanese market. Yes, exactly. But what is always the same? Kind of a sweet memory, milk back to Australia, young and fun spirit. Its logo. Yes, its logo. Its logo is always the same. What else? What else? So we know there are different flavors. Matcha. The shape, exactly. The shape of the chocolate. So there are three things that are always consistent about KitKat. It's always that red logo. It's the shape, which is quite unique. It's the fingers, either 2 or 4 fingers, and it's always wafer and chocolate, wafer and chocolate, wafer and chocolate. So there are 3 aspects of KitKats that are always the same, but beyond that, it changes. So this is a story about in Malaysia during COVID, people were moving towards more healthy foods. And it was very hard to get cocoa from Ghana because more than 80% of the world's chocolate comes from Africa. And as we all remember, there were supply chain troubles. And so the Malaysia team for Nestle was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? They had a supply chain challenge, and consumers were shifting towards more health conscious chocolate. So what might you do if you were Nestle Malaysia and you had these 2 challenges? Shifting consumer taste and a challenge in your supply chain. Often innovation comes from supply chain shortages. That's how Gucci developed its bamboo handle. It was during World War II and they couldn't get leather. So, onomatopoeia. So, after lots of research and ideation, they came up with a locally sourced dark chocolate product. Why? Because in Malaysia, you have the Borneo ancient forest. So Borneo rainforest is one of the largest, most dense forests in the world. They have the supply right there. And so it's extremely fertile. And what Nestle did, I mean, think about big thinking. They decided to partner with these local farmers to help them transition from palm oil to cocoa cultivation. Not only would it be better for the planet, but they'd make more money. And this locally grown cocoa produced a rich and very fruity dark chocolate, and dark chocolate aligns really well with the demand for healthier, high cocoa content that people were looking for during COVID. So KitKat decided to emphasize the local sourcing and regional pride in its packaging. So you still see the red logo, but all around that, they created a localized imagery using the rainforest hornbill bird there. You see it on the left, and on the right's the Rafflesia national flower. So they really anchored it in Malaysian identity and culture, and it was a huge hit. This innovation and the packaging alone pretty impressive, but the great part is that the sales skyrocketed, and it actually was a win-win-win. So it helped the brand, it decreased their dependence on African chocolate, and it developed a new sourcing opportunity. And so suddenly Nestle Malaysia was being supported by Malaysian industry for helping them shift their supply chain from palm oil to to cocoa. So this brings up another framework that's really helpful about when you try to brand global, adapt local, having freedom within a framework. So we started to talk about the framework, right? Those were three things that are held the same in KitKat bars all the time. But then you want to be able to allow your teams to have freedom around that or within that. That way it's recognizable. It's the same brand around the world, but you're allowed to shift aspects of it that you decide are the ones that need to be shifted. So it really encourages innovation that can create local value while honoring the global brand standards. It's always important to remember in food, like that spritz can, that taste is local. So it's where cultures remain wonderfully unique. And it's within those differences that opportunities lie for creating real meaning. All right. Now we're going to go to another way that we can look about that when the product is digital, not just a product. So we showed you what it's like when it's hard good, but what about when it's virtual?
So I wanted to do a quick time check with our hosts here because I know we want to allow time for questions at the end. Are we okay if we allow like 10 minutes for questions? Are we still?
Well, we have an hour and a half, remember?
We do? Okay. I just want to make sure we have enough time for questions at the end. Okay. And feel free to put your questions in the chat as well if you have any. So thank you, Catherine. I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when the product is digital. So how many of you work with tech companies? Anyone want to raise their hand or chime in the chat? Anybody work on digital products in this group? Figured many of you might. So I too work in tech, and I worked for many years at a company called HubSpot. Now, HubSpot is a public tech company known for its marketing automation software and CRM software. And when we were just getting started with our international expansion, one of the companies that we decided to focus on was Japan. Now, this was a Boston-based company. But we had success all over the world in many countries. In fact, we even had some partners in Japan. But I was put in charge of launching our office in Tokyo. And what I didn't realize at the time was that launching the office meant launching our brand. And one of the first things that I had to do was help hire the local team that would be the essence of our brand in Japan. I didn't know that at the time. But as soon as I started to talk to local employees and learn about the culture, I realized this is going to be a very different market for us. And every other market we went into, it was rather easy because we had similar culture. We had a lot of brand awareness already because of our brand, in English, and we had a lot of online traffic from all over the world in English. But when we went to Japan, everything was different. And what we didn't realize was in Japan, those of you who are dialing in from Japan today can attest to this, people don't change jobs as often as they do typically in the United States. And the cultural value associated with having a job working for a well-known brand is very different. In the United States, especially West Coast tech hubs, people have a lot of pride working at a startup. In Japan, there's a much greater importance for working for a very large, well-known brand because it conveys stability and it conveys that it's something special and important. So here we were, this, pretty large public tech company with, multi-billion-dollar company today. But in Japan, we were nothing. We were no one. No one knew us. And that's very humbling for a tech company that has gone public, had their IPO, been on on Wall Street ringing, the bell and all of the fanfare that goes with that. We're pretty much starting over in Japan because nobody knows our name. Nobody knows who we are, can barely say HubSpot in Japanese without it sounding really funny and hard to say. So one of the first things that I had to do was to help hire folks. And one of the first hires that I made was someone who could help us localize not just our content, but everything about our brand. And one of the first big projects that I had was localizing something that was called the Culture Code. And that was our set of values that we had as a company and the things that we believe in. I have a screenshot here of some of our employees in Japan in our Tokyo office, what we call TokeSpot, and also a screenshot of some of the words from our culture code localized into Japanese. What was so interesting is that when our employees came to us and they started working for us, it was only after we trained them on the culture code that they really understood where they were working. And that was important because when you're working at a software company, and especially a B2B software company, your brand is everything that you say and do when you're interacting with customers, and how you show up is really important. And you can't train people on every single word that they're going to say, but you can train them on the values that matter for your company and your brand, so that when they show up and when they speak to customers, they're all embodying the same values. So we had a lot of discussion about how some of our values were maybe not appropriate for the Japanese market, and our employees gave us feedback and helped us actually develop this to make it authentic for the Japanese market. So that's a little bit about taking a company global when it's digital. If you move on to the next slide, a couple of other interesting things about this. So when you're taking a digital product global, you really have to think about a lot beyond packaging and the product and many other things, because your distribution is digital too. And so everything that's online about your brand matters, but also how you deliver the product really may change. So when we localized our software platform, which means localizing and adapting and internationalizing every line of code and every aspect of the whole product experience, we realized, oh, some of these integrations to other apps that we have in our CRM might not actually be appropriate for the Japanese market, or maybe those aren't even available in Japanese. And what we learned very quickly was, oh, how people add contacts to a CRM is different in Japan. People have business cards, and they have business card scanning apps. We never knew that that was a thing, because nobody used business cards in the United States really anymore at that point. So we had, as you see, San here is one of the top business card readers in Japan. We had to actually develop a partnership with them, and that was something that I worked on very closely to help ensure that we could actually even capture the contacts to put in the CRM in that market. So you can see how it required product adaptation. It required adapting everything from our culture code to the product. And here you can see on the top, we had partners and we had featured customers. On our website, we couldn't feature the same customers, the same partners. We had to actually feature local partners. It takes time to build all those before you can swap them out on the website. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in order to do that. On the bottom right, what you see is one of my very first localization team members there, Aya, sitting in the front laughing. And what I love about that photo is it embodies the spirit of the culture, because we typically hired people who were a little quirky. Maybe they're not going to have, their hair perfectly smooth back in a bun, and they might not be wearing a full suit every day. But we really wanted to show our real employees on our website, especially on our careers page, to give people a sense of not only who they'd be working with, but to give our customers a sense of who their customer success manager would be, who their account manager would be, and make it real for them. So we did that in every country that we went into, not just in the United States. And we still feature this photo on the HubSpot website. So those are some examples of how adapting locally while you're branding globally is so, so important, even when your product is digital. People tend to think digital products, oh, easy. You just put it into Google Translate, right? Not so fast. We know that isn't enough. That's only a small part of the bigger picture.
Right. Thank you, Natalie. So next we want to go to China, because we thought that this will bring it home for you. And let's see what happens, because you can learn a lot, not only from the successes, but also from failures. So we're going to talk about Airbnb. I'm sure you all know Airbnb is super successful, originally a startup. I don't think it's considered a startup anymore. And after its success in the United States and in Europe, it started expanding in Asia. So About 10 years ago, it was focused on the Chinese market for lots of very good reasons that I'm sure all of you know. A very fast-growing economy, travel was increasing. The consumer market, right? Who's the consumer? Young, digitally savvy, upwardly mobile people who were traveling more, and they were looking for new travel experiences. So that new revenue opportunity, which is always the reason anyone is looking to expand, was very exciting. Airbnb brought a lot to the table, right? They already had good brand recognition. Not only that, they had strategic advisors in China. So that's often very important because you need to try to understand the local market. And they sent some of their top, one of the two top founders went himself over. They even rebranded with a Chinese name, with a Mandarin name called IBM. Maybe someone can put it in the chat because I have to go into my Japanese and try to get it right. In fact, I think I have it here. Yeah, there you go. So, they even created a Chinese name with kanji in order to create brand recognition, which is slightly different, right? So it's not Airbnb. It was much more about warmth and welcome, knowing that would appeal to the Chinese market. So there was lots of really good opportunities. However, there were several things that made it very difficult for them. There was a huge skepticism of home sharing. People found that couple things. They didn't know if they could trust the listings. How will we really know if this photo is accurate? I'm going to stay with strangers. People's moms had a hard time with that. And it was often the stories are that the potential travelers' mothers would say, I really don't want you to do that. Moreover, everyone was working so hard, the fact that they'd have to clean them at the end. They're paying for service to go and travel somewhere, and then they've got to actually clean them afterwards. And how did they know that someone who was there before them would actually clean it well after they leave? So there was no standard. So all of these issues were making it more and more challenging. Moreover, at the time, there was no credit system, credit cards in the same way that there was here. And that created a lot of uncertainty, both for those lending their homes and then for those buying it. Like, who is I going to pay and how is I going to do it? Now, local competitors, Sujia and Xiaozu, did a much better job. Those two built trust. They verified their listings. They created a private cleaning service in addition to whatever the person did. So they didn't have to do that. And they created all kinds of personal customer support. Airbnb was very slow to implement all of this. Certainly at the end, the COVID-19 pandemic didn't help. And so actually Airbnb, I was teaching this course year after year. And then in year 2022, I was teaching it and they pulled out. I'm like, how can I teach this class if actually it's not a success story, but a failure? So they literally pulled out. And so in the end, Airbnb just was not able to compete in the Chinese market. And they felt that the amount of time and money that they were spending there, they were not able to get it back. So they didn't understand consumer desires. They didn't create that psychological value, remember, that we talked about. And then, of course, anyone who's competed in the Chinese market, as I have, knows that it moves very quickly. And so there's a lot of stuff here that one can learn from Airbnb. So I teach this class every year at Berkeley. And I have to say, last year was the most incredible time because I brought my boss from Hyatt, who had been sent to Hong Kong to manage operations for all of Hyatt. And I asked students to do their research as to why Airbnb was unable to succeed in what they learned. And I'm going to just turn it over to one of those students to share what he discovered at the time. Neo?
Hi, I'm the student. So yeah, that class was one of my favorite ones during my MBA. So because it was a very familiar brand in China, and so that the news about like going back to the US has created a lot of influence in China. So for that class, for that homework, I didn't say that as a homework. I did some research about this failure. So I talked to some customers, a previous employee, even some competitors in China. So I identified several issues. I think the most important one is the brand name confusion. Like you said, like IBM, yeah, it's consistent with the native name, English name, IBM. But as a Chinese, I don't understand what it means. So someone proposed a name called 弱比邻. It means like your neighbors, but it was rejected by the executives. I think it's kind of overconfidence about the native names, and several other issues like customer service. In the US, we prefer using email to communicate with customers, but in China, we actually don't use emails, not so frequently. We use WeChat. We use some constant like messages. So like today, some of my friends even ask me where I can see the link of Zoom, because we send this link through email, but actually they prefer using WeChat. And another issue is about the pricing issue, like the Airbnb, the housing from Airbnb is sometimes 50% higher than Tujia and Xiaozhu. But just as you said, I think the root cause is the lack of cultural intelligence, because Chinese consumers are generally uncomfortable staying in strangers' homes, and they prefer certainty and safety over risk taking. Yeah.
Thanks, Neo. It was very impressive because he did all of this research overnight and presented his findings with hundreds of people online in China. My former boss at Hyatt told him he could probably have a job at Airbnb if he wanted to after he graduates.
Well, unfortunately, they don't sponsor international students.
Right. That's a challenge. So, Airbnb may not have been successful going into China, but they have been successful elsewhere. So we thought we would give you another example of Airbnb to show how, again, the brand global, adapt local, different things work.
Yes. So I love that example of Airbnb and the things that they didn't do right. And there's so many examples of Western companies going into Asian countries and messing things up. And there are many examples of the opposite happening too, of course. It's especially when it's such a big market as China is, but I've seen many Chinese companies also struggle to come into the US. But there are some great stories, including if you look at this article about Airbnb back from 2011, they actually had a really smart strategy for moving into Germany. So once they began their business model, they had a lot of clones, a lot of companies that were trying to basically clone and do the same thing in different countries. And so they had to move pretty fast or they would lose market share to homegrown competitors. So what they did was they bought a company called Akoleo in Hamburg, Germany, that was also in many other German cities, so that they could fend them off before they reached massive market penetration, so that they could have a higher chance of dominating in that market. Now, Airbnb is an interesting one because that was doing things a new way and introducing a new way of kind of a disruptive model. But Lenovo is another good example of a company doing something similar in another direction, a Chinese company coming in to take on more market share globally, but also in the US. And the way that they did that was very similar. They took on IBM's PC unit and rolled it into the business. This is actually a really great strategy that a lot of companies don't think about. Sometimes they think, well, we'll just move into another market and we'll just, try to go the hard way. Sometimes the easiest way is to align with a brand that's already trusted in that market, or to simply buy up the customers or buy up their technology or buy up something that already exists in that market. So you enter with a real strong foothold. So both companies did that in slightly different ways. And the other thing to point out here is even if Airbnb might have failed in one of the biggest, most important economies in the world, they also, at this time in 2011, had 60% of their revenue coming from outside the United States. So I think we tend to think of them as a US-focused business, but they're actually highly, highly global, and they were since very early on. It's just that even if you have experience with lots of countries and lots of revenue, it doesn't mean that you're not immune to failure if you fail to adapt to a new local market. So I think that's an important lesson for all of us just success in one market does not necessarily equal success in the next.
Right. And so there are certain things you can do to try to narrow those risks. This is another framework. So if you notice at the end of each case, we're providing some frameworks that help you create rules for how to go about it. This is one I really love because there's so many different variables at work when you're taking a brand in one industry to go into another market. And it's called CAGE, the CAGE framework of distance. So it's a CAGE for the different letters: cultural, administrative, geographic, and economic differences. And it allows you to figure out what kind of industry are you in? Based on the distance between your country of origin and the country in which you're trying to do business, is it most sensitive to cultural issues, administrative, geographic, and economic? Each industry is going to be more or less dependent on one of these variables. So in hospitality, staying in a stranger's home on credit and faith about the rooms are going to look the way they did and the cleanliness is going to be there, is affected by both cultural and administrative differences. So the key thing, as Natalie said, is that trust doesn't necessarily transfer from one market to another. You have to build it market by market, customer by customer, and adapt your products, your pricing, your distribution, your marketing in every single market. But as we've tried to show, it's the same process each time, is knowing your brand, knowing your audience, and then figuring out which aspects of your marketing and strategy do you want to adapt. So we have one more story, but I think it's probably best now to shift and talk about questions. And if we have more time, we can always get to the next one. The last one I think that we had prepared was going to Japan and Gucci. Although I did see someone talked about a jewelry brand. So this is a jewelry story, but maybe we'll take some questions and then we can always come back to this. So I'm going to stop sharing for now, so everyone can see each other's faces, and we can always come back to this if we have time.
Thank you, Catherine and Natalie, for your sharing. Very insightful, and thank you for the guys for joining our event. We do have some the questions coming up from the chat box. I think let's start with these and then go to some the questions gathered from the registrants, and then we can move forward. Just to play by ear. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think the first question from the audience here is that, for starting a brand like a jewelry, like we mentioned, Catherine, some people are working for jewelry brand here and starting a brand from scratch with a set price target. What is a good cost-efficient way to get customer feedback, inputting super early phase? And also a question, how would you think leveraging modern digital brand strategy, for example, KOL, etc.? I think these are all about a branding from 0 to 1.
Yeah. So the key thing to remember is that every brand is different and every target is different. Even if we talk about jewelry, I have a case study here for Gucci. Right? I'm not sure if the price point of your product in jewelry is going to be the same as that one at Gucci and which market you're going into. So,
should I? Because I asked the question, I think I can just ask
directly.
Sure.
So
Go
the
ahead.
brands that I'm thinking. So first of all, I think total disclaimer, totally new to marketing. I have never worked in any consumer goods before, so bear with me if I'm totally newbie. So this is a brand that I'm thinking of start, and it's pretty flexible. The price point I'm thinking is, I don't know whether you're aware. I think recent years there's a pretty fast growing company called Majuri. So it's a bright price point is below Pandora for sure, but definitely not hit Gucci, and it's around a few $100 at max. That's what I'm thinking. So the customer reach, I would think, is the mid kind of tier in commerce. This is totally new, and then I have some prototype already. I'm also thinking mixing probably Chinese culture aesthetic with US clean kind of cut aesthetics as well. But since it's super new, I'm basically thrown into this unknown field with
millions of directions to go. So I wanted to see like how can I narrowly fit the customer reach to the point that the potential customer group can be. Second is like I'm looking at some of the examples that I wanted to like match and target. They are leveraging a lot of the modern digital kind of campaign, like KOL and Instagram being one of the biggest ones. Like how would you think of leveraging that? It's all very practical, so feel free to like just give high level guidance. And third one is like I think thinking long term, right? I think having some kind of early adopters, maybe along the way I will have some feedbacks, and then how would I determine like this brand needs major reposition or like redesign, as you said in the Park Hyatt example, like brand should be flexible, but you have to have a staple like a core value. How can I know that? Versus like how can I know it's just a rich problem, the upper funnel is still low, I wanted to get more. So I think a lot of questions, but feel free to just pick a few of them to answer.
Okay. Well, I think first of all, a $100 jewelry item, you're going into massive competition. And so you're going to have to figure out what's going to make you stand out. So that's what you really need to know. If you're designing it yourself, it's like, what is it that you bring? What is it that you do differently? Why will people buy it? What is the benefit? We talked about values. Is it a functional value? Is it a monetary value? Is it a psychological value? Are you, as a designer, someone that is known and recognizable? Is there, and you want to put the fame around yourself? There's a reason that fashion brands have creative directors, because they can promote those creative directors. And then they become so big, like Tom Ford, and they have to start their own. They get too big for the brand. So, there are all those questions, and it always starts with your brand, understanding your brand and understanding your market, because there will be people who will be attracted to that kind of a brand at that price point. And you have to understand what it is that will make them, that is a benefit to them. And so we didn't talk about competition, but when you're looking at your brand, I talked a little bit about it when I mentioned Park Hyatt. I said, it's not like Mandarin Oriental. He's a fan, she's a fan. We went in the opposite direction. And sometimes that's very helpful to do the exact opposite of what everyone else is doing, because you stand out. That being said, I think when you're a small startup that no one knows, using KOLs is a very effective way if you can get someone to go from 0 to 1. Because if some huge celebrity starts to wear your item, just look at Taylor Swift and the little big diamond ring she had on her finger that she wore, and now all of a sudden this unknown jeweler is hugely famous. So yeah, if you can get Taylor Swift to wear your item, I think that would work. Okay, so those are kind of the first things. I think if you're really starting in marketing, I mean, I hate to say it, but we can't answer enough here about all this. There are lots of ideas. The Gucci story is actually in here. You can read about it. It talks about country of origin, which you can leverage it either about your own country or you as a designer. So, and in terms of customer insights, I would say, Natalie, you may have some ideas about how to do consumer insights inexpensively. That's exactly what Natalie does.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're really starting out early, you're in this phase of finding product market fit and trying to figure out what is truly unique, like Catherine said. You mentioned bringing in cultural aspects, and melding like Chinese and American aesthetics. And that could be something very interesting and novel that could be, the differentiation. But knowing your target market and who you're targeting specifically, maybe they would be willing to pay more for that because it's unique. Or maybe they say, you know what, I know 5 other brands that do that. Here's what I really want. But starting to ask people and actually talking to them is great. And because it's a physical product, one of the best things to do is show people, have them wear it, take it out, and let them give you feedback. You can do all kinds of great things with consumer testing online, of course, but when it's something that you put on your body, I think it's always best to show people, have them feel it, have them see it, and have them try it on and give feedback about what they like about it. And if it's only images that you have. Of course, you can test those things online. You can do A/B tests. You can do, quick things. You can even do little tricks on social media to very easily test and see what people gravitate toward with minimal risk. But I think the number one thing is to get real feedback from potential customers. And then that also helps you identify who your target customer is. You might notice, every single person who said they love this is over the age of 50. I didn't think that. I thought I was, targeting 20 to 30-year-olds. You just never know until you start to get feedback. So the sooner you can do that, the better, I think.
Thanks all for the answers. I will definitely order the book. So
great.
Thank you. I think given the time limit, let's throw two more questions. A question from Vivian. For startups, do you recommend first going deep in one market before expanding globally, or building an international brand narrative from the very beginning?
I would love to say something about this. I think it depends on what your product is, what kind of company you have, what kind of business model you have. Some companies are what we would call born global. My website is Born to Be Global. I care about that a lot because I work in tech and digital. A lot of companies are born global from the start. You can do that. You can build a global business from the very beginning. In fact, the founders of Canva did that. They even sought investment from multiple continents and investors so that they could build a truly global brand from day one. But they're very much focused on, their headquarters in Australia. So most companies do need to focus on one market at a time and go deeper and deeper. It's something that I've called market intensification. If you happen to be a digital company and you have interest in your product from multiple places, which one are you going to choose to intensify in? Because often if you're selling online, you might get traffic from multiple places. You might get, if you're in an app store, you might get downloads from multiple countries. But where do you really want to focus? Because that's when you have to make investment decisions with your marketing budget. So I think it depends on what your goals are, and also what type of product you have and what type of distribution model you have.
Mm-hmm. So question from CT, what the brand sometimes rebranding means for those B2B service less impactful compared with B2C products. I think this is also for you, Natalie, because you have quite some experience working for like a B2B service and B2B products.
Yes. So what does the brand mean for B2B service? I think your brand is actually equally impactful and perhaps even more impactful for B2B. Often the prices are higher for B2B, and so it's really important that you care about your brand. Obviously, there are expensive B2C products too, but often for B2B, it's a buying committee. So it's multiple people involved in the decision. And so how you show up as a brand is actually even more important, in my opinion, when you're trying to show up the same way, but speak to all the different needs of multiple people. You often do have to then, you're adapting more things at a time because you have to adapt your messaging for each profile and each, if you're selling to a procurement officer and a marketing director and a consumer insights user, you might have to have 3 very different messages. Imagine taking that global. Then you have to localize that for each market. So it does get far more complex, but I would say brand is the heart of everything, no matter what business you're in. B2C, B2B, your brand is the heart of the company, and it's how your customers know you, remember you, and how the market perceives you.
Got it. So the last question from Sophie, I think this is for Catherine. Can you talk more about psychological value for starting up a brand now? How do you think of collectibles?
Yeah,
Catherine?
just add a little bit there. Very informative panel. Thank you so much, Catherine. I think essentially what I want to ask is that how do you think of the zeitgeist of, for anyone who is building a consumer brand right now? So each time, each era would need something that's really iconic that, speak for people. Nike is one of them. So as we think about this, I think, psychological value from my instinct is something that could be even more important right now. But, if you could just share more in general, how do we think about psychological value for any brand builder right now? Yeah, thank you.
I think it's really important to keep in mind all 3, to tell you the truth. But I think psychological value has the largest room for opportunity because it's intangible. Monetary value is tangible. Someone, if you can make a better quality t-shirt than Uniqlo, better price, I'd like to see it because they are so big and they, manage their factories so quickly, and they have very high quality. So, that always works, but you're racing to the bottom, and at a certain point, it's just free. Functional value is also really practical, right? When someone designs a new kind of a serrated knife that can cut bread, I mean, that's huge, right? When you design something functional, people will all go to it. Psychological value is very broad. And there are all different kinds of things in psychological value. And the nice thing about psychological value is you can't quantify it. And so you get to play with what you want your price to be. I work in luxury. I work in luxury Shiseido. Why does Shiseido have $1,000 creams? There isn't really a reason, even if we tell you that it's this very rare silkworm from the northern part of Thailand. And it's true. There is this incredible silkworm that makes this substance that is used in Clé de Peau night creams. But still, does it warrant $1,000? No. That's a signifier for something that is rare, hard to get. And so you ask about collectibles. Collectible by definition means rare. Limited edition is a great way to create demand. You see it in fashion shows, right? Oh, we only have a certain number that we can actually manufacture. So you got to be the first one. The Hermes Kelly bag, how many people can get, or the Birkin bag? How many people can get a Birkin bag? You have to already be a customer buying expensive Hermes bags to even get considered to be able to spend $15,000 on a Birkin bag. So as soon as you create something that has scarcity, which the luxury brands are very good at doing, but so is Nike. I mean, there's a reason it releases sneakers in limited edition and has created this huge demand. I mean, when I was at Nike, I was so surprised to realize that we were purposely short producing the shoes because we wanted to leave some of that demand in the marketplace. If we satisfied the demand, it would be over. If we left people hungry and they couldn't get it, they would still have that hunger for the next year when we delivered it again. So in terms of collectibles, there's a natural psychological value for a certain customer. It's not for everybody. Not everyone wants to collect the same things. A lot of people don't even care about a Birkin bag, though they do say that Birkin bags even increase in value, and the secondhand market is even higher than the market of if you can get your hands on one. So, I mean, I think it depends what your collectible is, who your market is, and what kind of value you're creating, because there are so many different kinds. And I show a chart in my class of a pyramid because functional value is on the bottom. But as you increase in different kinds of emotional value, you choose the price because all of this is subjective. Where you're going to put that price point is up to you. And it's about how you can create that demand for the product you're creating for a certain customer who's willing to pay.
Yeah, I would add to that it's very important to see where the consumer is headed, because what value the consumer derives will change, and their tastes will constantly change. One trend right now in food and beverage is that a lot of people are now caring a lot more about their health and nutrition. And so there's a lot of specialized brands that people will pay 3, 4, 5 times as much money if they know they get additional protein or they get additional omega-3 content. Those types of products are, delivering on a promise that delivers a value that's, functional, but then there's also an aspirational aspect to it in many cases that, I want to be buying a brand that is clean or that is manufactured according to my standards and my values as a person. So it relates to that as well. And we're seeing with younger generations in the United States, in particular in Europe, that's becoming ever more important. People want to put their money in with brands that they actually believe in and that walk the walk on their values. So there's that aspect of it as well.
Thank you both. That's very helpful.
Thank you both. Thank Sophie as well. And I think we have still 5 minutes. Let's drop another question, the last one, okay? So question from HP. I'm wondering, what do you think of Lululemon? It was famous for its psychological value, but these days has like sales decline. What's the reasons behind?
Yeah, poor Lululemon.
Yeah.
Athleisure has gotten so popular. There are like so many different yoga shops, athleisure shops. There's, Lululemon and Alo Yoga and all the Nike selling the same thing, New Balance is selling the same thing, Adidas selling the same thing, Under Armour. I mean, every single person is selling leggings. And there are all these different kinds of leggings. And I think so I think it's two things. One is I think it's over competition, very hyper competition, and a lack of innovation. And then the consumers moved away from that. Denim is all over. It's, the big loose pants from COVID. People are still into loose. And then denim is really coming back. Heavyweight denim. I mean, it is a time Levi's and, we'll see if Levi's can get on top of it, but Gap is coming back too. So I think that there's just consumers shift, and then that's where fashion is really very hard because there's a lot of people going after the same markets, and you need to always innovate. I mean, I live in an athletic town. It's the headquarters of Nike, and we have the headquarters of Adidas now in the US here, and there are so many different Columbia Sportswear is here, and a lot of different companies start up here, but it's very, very competitive.
Super competitive. I would add that Lululemon was growing market share in the United States for a very long time and then slowed down in the US, but picked up outside the US. And so their international revenue was actually soaring for quite some time. Recently, they have had impact from the tariffs, and that's one reason why their revenues are slowing down. So it's interesting, Catherine mentioned some of the aspects of like economic and administrative and like all of those things. When you're dealing with international markets, currency exchange rates and tariffs and international trade legislation, all of those things really, really can impact a business. It can tank a business actually overnight. So it's really important to think about these things when you're selecting what markets to go into and how much do you go into them. International was great when they were growing. Now with tariffs, a little harder for them. And they, as Catherine said, are losing market share in the US because they have a lot more competition. And they're no longer the trendy hot brand that not as many people have, that was more considered upmarket. Now they've got lots of competitors in the same price range. So, it's a more crowded space in the US market. It's maybe more greenfield in countries like the United Kingdom and others where their brand is actually considered still to be novel and new, and not as stale as maybe in the US market compared to more recent competitors. So it'll be interesting.
And, the tariffs aren't the same in Europe, right? So in terms of Chinese companies, one of the huge success stories are the electric cars.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's incredible. I think that the BYD and Great Wall Motors are now dominant players in the European market, especially because everyone hates Tesla there because of the political impact from the American administration. And I was also reading they're going into Brazil as the US-Brazil trade is under threat because of tariffs. Chinese EV makers are going right into Brazil. And the important thing is that they're really, I think in this case, very mindful of those markets and those countries' needs. Like they're really selling it on affordability, practicality, reliability. I think that was the image of EVs coming from China was something they had to get over from a consumer perspective. We talk a lot in our book about country of origin. Where you're from is both an asset and can be a liability, depending on what your business is and where your product is made. So it's a very important aspect to be aware of, that you either want to dial it up or you want to dial it down and work around it, because often you can't get away from that, especially in a day where we have tariffs.
Right, great. I think we did have a lot of questions which we don't have time to answer one by one today, but we have put a QR code for our WeChat group. Feel free to join the WeChat group to throw your questions in, and we also have a survey form. You can take 3 minutes to answer the survey, and we will have a events update from time to time. You can also leave your questions to Catherine and Natalie for your specific needs or questions. We will follow up specifically with one by one of you. Thank you for your time, and your turn, Leonie.
Yeah, thank you all for joining today's session, and we really hope you enjoyed today's session. And we really appreciate Catherine and Natalie's sharing. So later we will share the QR code, and we hope you leave the feedback, and also feel free to join our the WeChat group. Then we can discuss more, and we can talk about more about the brand and the relevant topics. Thank you all. Thank you.
1回生，2回熟，3回交个好朋友。听完本期节目，想要参加 SmallWOD 在全球各地的活动，请下载 SmallWOD App， 我们会提前向你发出活动邀请。百闻不如一见，快来和我们面基。